trading at $1.24.5 against the Hong Kong dollar. The pound it's rebounded a little bit there as well, currently trading at $9.67. And in the stock markets, the ASX 200 currently down 7 points. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 currently down 25 points. Thank you very much for listening this morning. A long weekend coming up, so no Money Talk on Monday. Money Talk will be back at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. I'll be here on Monday morning from 6 to 10 with some chat and some music to take you through the public holiday, so do please join me for that. The weather forecast, just before I go, there is a tropical cyclone lingering over the northern part of the South China Sea. Standby signal number 1 is in force, but the observatory says the chance of issuing the strong wind signal number 3 in the morning is not high. Sunny intervals, there's going to be a few squally showers later. Maximum temperature is going to be about 30 degrees. It's going to be windier with a few rain patches over the weekend and the Chungyung Festival holiday. Temperature right now is 27 degrees. The relative humidity is 79%. It's 8:31 with the latest news bulletin. Here's Samantha Butler.
2 days after Haiti was struck by Hurricane Matthew, a picture is emerging of utter devastation on the country's southwestern peninsula. The number of dead is now close to 300, according to Haiti's Civil Protection Force. Relief agencies say the peninsula's main city, Jérémie, suffered complete destruction, with 80% of the buildings levelled. Guy Calvert-Lee of the charity Tear Fund relayed what he'd heard from a pilot who flew over areas hit by the hurricane.
He reported scenes of total devastation. He said that in some places 75 or 80% of houses had had their roofs ripped off. He reported trees felled, walls down, water cut off as well. Most of these poor communities live on the edge at the best of times, so when they're hit by a devastating hurricane like this, then it's particularly difficult for them.
The leaders of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have opened their annual meeting in Washington with a rallying call for globalization. The head of the World Bank, Dr. Jim Kim, called for a reinvigoration of global free trade, saying it was the only way to eliminate extreme poverty. He said he understood why people were concerned about their economic futures.
I hear them, and they're saying, my life is not better than my parents', and my children's life doesn't look like it's going to be better than mine. And so there is a real concern. But the answer is to have more robust social protection programs so that you have a safety net. And then you got to get serious about getting the skills you need for the jobs of the future.
The unpredictable weather will be testing drivers at this weekend's Formula E race featuring electric cars. It's the third season of the innovative series, but the first time Hong Kong is hosting the event, which takes place on a 1.8-kilometre track at the Central Harbourfront. Formula E champion Renault will be defending its title. Panasonic's Jaguar team will make their debut with a vehicle capable of reaching speeds of up to 225 kilometres an hour. James Barclay is the team director.
It's our first year back into motor racing after 12 years, so this year really is a learning year for us. So we're coming in really open-minded with the intention to take as much away from this race in terms of our development program, but absolutely we'll be racing as hard as we can from race 1 here in Hong Kong. But we are mindful of the fact that we've got some learning to do this year, and we're just looking forward to be back on track and back racing.
You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Good morning. Welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chiverton, your co-host today, Danny Gittings. Danny, good morning to you.
Good morning.
We're talking first today about Joshua Wong and Thailand. After being denied entry to the country and being detained for 12 hours on Wednesday, the activist says the government must respond, the Hong Kong government must respond if Hong Kongers are blacklisted by other governments. He said that Thailand had a right to deny entry to anyone it wished, but he was told that he was a wanted man, and that if that was the case, Hong Kong authorities have a duty to follow up. Well, the Security Bureau says it's Thailand's business, it won't interfere. Thailand says it's China's business. What's going on? Do you think China's at fault here, or do all superpowers act similarly? Does the incident reflect on one country, two systems? Do you think it was all just a publicity stunt for Joshua Wong? Email us with your thoughts and comments. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. Our Facebook page, Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. After 9:20, we're talking about the private Grand Prix on public land. Only 6,000 people will be allowed allowed to watch this weekend's Formula E race. Why is that? Stick around to find out more. Joining us for our first discussion, we have now Lawrence Ma, who's a barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, Willie Lam, who's adjunct professor at the Centre for China Studies at the Chinese University, and we hope to be joined soon also by Mark Daly, an international human rights lawyer, and other guests later in the programme. Willie Lam, good morning to you.
Oh, hi, how are you?
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us today. Can you explain this kind of the geopolitics of this? What's Thailand up to here, and why do you think Thailand it's kind of brushed it off and said this is all Chinese, it's nothing to do with us?
Well, this is of course not the first time that the Thai government has apparently responded to Chinese requests regarding sending back or denying entry to so-called blacklisted people. And actually, I think it's well known that during the so-called Causeway Bay booksellers case, the major owner of Causeway Bay bookstore, Mr. Gui Minhai, was abducted by Chinese state security agents sometime last year and then sent back to China. So,
There's never been any evidence that the Thai authorities were involved in that. If anything, the Thai authorities at least claimed that they were investigating it and it was a mystery to them.
Well, they were investigating, except that we have very clear-cut CCTV footage from the apartment building where Mr. Gui was staying, and that showed four ethnic Chinese men taking Gui away and so forth. I think the point of the issue is that it's a stated policy, as the Prime Minister Prayuth yesterday made known, that they would respond to Chinese requests regarding either repatriating so-called troublesome Chinese back to China, or in this case, denying assets to blacklisted Hong Kong people. So, well, at this stage, the Hong Kong immigration authorities have indicated that the day before, when Joshua Wong got into trouble and so forth, they did ask the Chinese embassy in Thailand to find out what's happening, but this has not been effective because Wong was actually incarcerated for up to 12 hours in Bangkok. So I think the Hong Kong government should put this across to the Thai authorities in stronger terms, ensuring that this will not happen again, or at least if a Hong Kong national is denied entry, then he or she would be sent back immediately and not subjected to humiliating experience in a prison cell in the Thai airport.
It could have been worse, couldn't it? I mean, we've had several foreign governments in recent months sending Taiwanese back to the mainland, haven't they? What would happen if Thailand or another foreign government said that the Thai leader said Hong Kong or mainlanders, they were all Chinese, decided to send them to Beijing instead of back to Hong Kong?
Right. Well, Joshua Wong yesterday said, he feared that his worst fate might be being quote-unquote repatriated back to China to face Chinese law and so forth. But I think the main point is that the Hong Kong government should not pretend that nothing has happened. Joshua Wong is a Hong Kong permanent resident, and I think they should put the case across to the Bangkok authorities in stronger terms to ensure that at least, of course, that Thailand as a sovereign country has the right to deny entry to people, but at least these people should be treated with the minimal degree of respect and not be put in a cell for 12 hours.
The Hong Kong government doesn't really have anything to do with Hong Kongers, though, does it? Outside Hong Kong, that's China's business.
Joshua Wong is a Hong Kong citizen, and I think the onus is on the Hong Kong government, which represents Hong Kong citizens, to ensure that Hong Kong citizens traveling worldwide should be entitled entitled to a reasonable degree of respect. Joshua Wong has broken no laws in Thailand, and I think his treatment it is below what international standards would demand. So I think a responsibility of the Hong Kong government to ensure that Hong Kong citizens are treated fairly when they travel overseas.
Okay, let's bring in Lawrence Ma. Lawrence Ma is barrister and chair of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. Good morning, Mr. Ma. Thank you for joining us again. What do you make of these events involving Joshua Wong?
Well, I would say that if you want to talk about personal safety, the Basic Law Article 29 doesn't talk about personal safety. It talks about usually protection of homes. Now, that's the first.
It talks about the right to travel, though. Right to travel has been tested in the courts. It involves being able to go somewhere and come back, and Joshua Wong couldn't go.
Oh, I have no doubt that he has exercised his right to travel to Thailand, and that really exhausted that right. The other thing is what I wanted to say is the Basic Law has no extraterritorial application outside the realm of the PRC, because it is, of course, the Basic Law is a constitutional instrument in Hong Kong. It is nonetheless also a national law of the PRC. So, I mean, if you want to say that there is a legal obligation to make sure that he has right to enter, then it would be stretching too far the Basic Law.
I'm not sure, Willie Lam, when anyone actually referred to a legal obligation. It's more the general principle that a government looks after its people when they're travelling. I mean, you think of all these cases where Hong Kong people get in trouble all over the world, and the immigration department sends officials over, and then for this case, it washes, or the government washes its hands.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I agree that for all these rescue missions and assistance that the government given to people overseas is a good government humanitarian policy. But what I'm just wanting to say to stop short is it is not a constitutional law requirement. A state constitution doesn't operate internationally.
Okay, so it's not. We can put aside the Basic Law for this one. It's not a constitutional requirement, but it is a common practice in other situations where Hong Kong people get in trouble overseas. So shouldn't the Hong Kong government be doing the same in this case as well?
Well, then the reality is what has the power of a Hong Kong government in a foreign jurisdiction? I mean, what can we request, or we can request, of course, but can we compel the Thai government in putting him in the next flight instead of questioning him for hours? Now, I guess we can make a request, but of course, whether that is complied with or respected is really up to the foreign government.
Does this mean that Chinese people from Hong Kong travelling around the world are completely at the mercy of China, and without any due process, without any recourse to law or whatever? If you've upset Beijing for whatever reason, even if you've not been convicted of a crime, you can be nabbed and sent back to China, and nobody can do anything about it.
I would have doubt that the Thai government would have sent him back to the mainland China. But even if he has been sent back to the mainland China, I would have thought that Joshua Wong would be denied entry into the mainland, similar to other occupying central participants, and he would be
or you get sent back to Hong Kong.
Yeah, got sent back to Hong Kong.
And no one will represent you. No, there's no one, because it's nothing to do with Hong Kong. It's nothing to do with Thailand. They say it's nothing to do with them. Beijing will obviously say that no, we didn't put any pressure on anybody.
I don't really think Beijing has, because of Joshua Wong, put pressure on the Thai government. The blacklist.
Well, the Thai government. I mean, I know there are conflicting messages coming from different parts of the Thai government, but at least some parts of the Thai government were saying yes, that we did get this message from Beijing.
Yes, that's what the Prime Minister said, but the official statement a couple of hours after that was to say that he was participating in a political protest, or talks actually, to Thai students in a university celebrating some deadly government crackdowns 40 years ago. So I would have thought that when the Prime Minister was making that statement about pressure from China, he hasn't been briefed as to the purpose of Joshua Wong's entry. I think when the pictures become clear that it's not just the blacklist, the blacklist, circulating blacklist that has the force of compelling the Thai government to do so. It was really the Thai government's own decision that because he is coming into Thailand, participating in a university talk that might stir up protest against the government, therefore the Thai government has made a decision to refuse entry.
Well, that is could I jump in that?
Willie Lam, yes.
Well, there's a long record, stretching back to Gui Minhai, but not just Gui Minhai. There have been several cases of the Chinese citizens in China who have somehow reached Thailand, and then they have been sent back to Beijing. As far as I understand, from my contacts with the diplomatic community in Hong Kong as well as in Thailand, there is little doubt that Beijing has handed the Bangkok administration a blacklist, including Joshua Wong in this case, who might be given special treatment. I think the main point
So just stop you there, Willie Lam. So that's something that we've become accustomed to Beijing having a blacklist of Hong Kong people that it will not allow into China. But are you saying now there's also a blacklist of Hong Kong people which might be circulated? If it's been circulated to the Thai government, it's presumably circulated to other regional governments like Malaysia that also refused entry to Joshua Wong and many other governments friendly to Beijing.
That's my.
You think this would be?
I got from diplomatic communities in both in Bangkok and in Hong Kong. That is the case. Of course.
Do you think that? Sorry.
Not too many governments would abide by Beijing's wishes, but there are certain countries dependent on Chinese economic aid or who are on a very good terms with China who might overlook international law and succumb to China's requests, for the purpose of political expediency and so forth.
And isn't that fairly standard? And isn't that kind of legitimate? You'd expect. I mean, America wouldn't want its enemies to travel around, and it would talk to friendly governments and say we'd rather you didn't allow this person entry. And some governments would say yes, and some governments would say no, depending on the diplomatic situation vis-a-vis the United States. And it's just like that. It's just what happens.
The U.S. and other governments might have done so, but this does not, in the case of Thailand, exonerate the Bangkok administration of responsibility, to well respect the international laws and international human rights covenants and so forth. So I think the main point is the Hong Kong government should not pretend that nothing has happened. It should at least go on the record issuing a protest to the Bangkok administration, for ill treatment being given to a Hong Kong resident denied entry. Regarding the bigger picture, of course...
sorry, Willie Lam, let's just finish on this point of the blacklist, because this is a very, very important point. You say diplomats are talking about this blacklist. I mean, how much do you know about it? What's your understanding? Is it the same blacklist of people who are not allowed to enter China, or do we think it's a different blacklist? And how widely is it circulating?
Well, the blacklist changes from time to time. We have known, for example, that other participants in the umbrella movement, members of localist parties and so forth, have been denied entry. I mean, much lesser known people than Joshua Wong have been denied entry to countries in Asia that are either friendly with China or dependent on...
Which countries are you thinking about here?
Well, these include Malaysia, of course, which last year denied entry to Joshua Wong, but also countries including Laos, Cambodia, and so forth, which are considered by some experts as client states of China. So the picture is actually bigger than Thailand.
And this blacklist must be a relatively new thing. I mean, we wouldn't have heard about a blacklist being circulated across Asia 10 years or so ago. It must be something that's emerged within the last, 4 or 5 years or so.
Well, this has emerged in the wake of China becoming a semi-superpower and being a major so-called benefactor state to a number of smaller countries in Asia, which are considered to be client states of China. But I think the point should be made that first of all, members of localist parties, members of the political organizations which are seen as unfriendly to China, I think they should be warned that, things like what happened to Joshua Wong might happen if they were to go to Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and so forth. And the Hong Kong government, I think, should make a clear-cut statement, and also an indication, at least a statement to these countries, to at least give full respect to the rights of Hong Kong citizens traveling there, even though, of course, sovereign governments have the right to deny entry to whoever they think are not suitable. Nonetheless, respect for personal integrity should be abided by.
Mark Daly has joined us, an international human rights lawyer. Mr. Daly, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What's your take on this, especially on the blacklist? Does the Hong Kong government, does any government have an obligation, as Joshua Wong is suggesting, to disclose who's on the blacklist?
Yes, well, firstly, detention and, from what I hear, solitary confinement, very, very serious matter, and I think that, I like to look at this from a rule of law perspective. I keep bringing that out, but defining what the rule of law is. I hope Joshua and his, people, contacts that he has in Thailand, I hope they pursue this, because, yes, this is a Thai legal issue, and every country has its own laws, but I think he needs to pursue it there, and get to the bottom of the real reasons for why.
It's a bit difficult to pursue it when you're not even allowed into the country, and he said he didn't even have Wi-Fi access to it. He couldn't. It was essentially incommunicado. Yeah.
Pursue the reasons for why he was not allowed in, and then also from the angle of the Hong Kong government should be pursuing this to get to the, he should be trying to push them to pursue this to get to the bottom of the mystery. Because at the end of the day, one of your speakers said, that the danger of this is just it's completely contrary to the rule of law. Save exceptional circumstances, people need to know where they stand.
Problem is, Mark Daly.
Who, is this at China's request? Is this simply a Thailand thing? What is this? We have to put light on this and expose this and get to the reasons. We have precedent in Hong Kong.
The problem is, Mark Daly,
the Falun Gong case, the Court of Appeal, and getting at the reasons for why people were not allowed into Hong Kong. Right?
You fought so many immigration cases yourself, Mark Daly. You know that different rules apply in immigration cases, and that immigration officials have much wider discretion, even in Hong Kong, than in other areas of law, and also that they are not normally compelled to give reasons. There are so many cases, the Hong Kong Immigration Department taking a decision not giving reasons. So when the Thailand says they're not going to give reasons, it's the same pattern.
Yeah, wider discretion, but not they're not completely absolved from providing reasons. So I think it needs to be pursued from a variety of angles, from a rule of law perspective.
Case you mentioned, the Falun Gong, you only got reasons when you took them to court, didn't you? And through our legal system,
my case, but yes, so that that is something that he needs to consider. I mean, because I think it is a very, very important issue for people, and for transparency, and for certainty, and for all the reasons that we want to have the rule of law. So it's a big issue, Thailand and China and Hong Kong, and it's a huge rule of law issue.
Okay, well, this is that's kind of contrary to what Henry says on our Facebook page. Thanks very much. Henry says, Joshua's comments show he is politically naive. Surely no country has any obligation to disclose to the world their blacklist. No country has any power over other countries to respond to queries on immigration experience like Joshua's. Such are sovereign acts. Also, each country has its own right on how to deal with, as they deem fit, with persons entering their country. Under one country, two systems, foreign affairs are dealt with by mainland, and there is nothing the SAR could do about this. There is an ancient Chinese phrase, ask the do's and don'ts when entering a country. Clearly, Joshua has not done his homework and has not learned from his previous expulsion by Malaysian authorities. To me, there's not much to discuss here, since sovereign acts are national in nature. I thought there were other more intellectually stimulating topics than Joshua's case to discuss. Mark Daly, do you want to respond to that?
Just repeat what I said. No, I disagree. Internationally, we're trying to move towards adhering to certain minimum standards and rule of law principles. And yes, we still have that the balancing that with sovereignty. guarantee, but I think we want to continue to move. And Thailand has a legal system, and let's find out there what the actual reasons were.
Let's bring Lawrence Ma back into the discussion. Lawrence Ma, do you agree Joshua Wong should try and pursue legal remedies in Thailand?
I don't think he is. I think this is really a publicity stunt, as you said earlier in the program. But what I want to supplement is that when Mark, who I respect him, that he said about the rule of law, if you dig deeper, the freedom of expression is guaranteed by the ICCPR. It also has a competing restriction, which is protection of national security. So, I mean, if you put the rule of law to the Thai government, he will say to you that, yes, he has the right freedom of expression, but we also have a power and obligation to protect national security. So, I mean, to draw a balance is very much so the practice of each. It is different between countries. Some countries may be more liberal, some are not. So you cannot go and say that unless that degree or dichotomy is challenged in the court, and let the court decide as to whether the Thai government's decision is right or wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. But let's get at it. Let's find out where the balance is. And it's always an issue of balance, and security concerns will come up. But let's to the best of our ability find out what the actual security concerns were.
Okay, Willie Lam, there's an interesting editorial in the in the Hong Kong Standard today talking about Thailand's attitude to the case and making the point that, because a lot of people have said, well, Thailand also kind of have a vested interest because they don't want Joshua Wong there stirring up trouble, especially on this anniversary. And the editorial was making the point that in fact it's in the Thai government's interest to kind of pass the buck, to decrease the attention on Thailand and this anniversary, the sensitive anniversary of the massacre of students and so on, by pinning it on China. So they're saying, well, it's nothing much to do with us, it's all to do with China, and then they get out of the sort of uncomfortable or unwelcome associations with that massacre.
Well, that's a possibility that this might be true, but in any case, looking at the track record, I mean, there have been numerous cases of not just the Uyghurs dissidents, but also Chinese dissidents being sent back to China. So I think it's beyond dispute that the Thai government has allowed Beijing to dictate its immigration policy to some extent. But I think the point, most importantly, is that the onus is on the Hong Kong government to do something about this, at least to make a strong case to the Thai authorities that Hong Kong citizens should not be ill-treated, even upon denying entry to Thailand. And also, the Hong Kong government need to find out more about these blacklists, which apparently the Chinese government has given to various Asian countries regarding Hong Kong citizens considered to be dangerous and should be and recommended denial of assets of entry. So I think more should be done by the Hong Kong government to explain fully to the Hong Kong public this grave situation, because Hong Kong is a commercial city. Hong Kong citizens need to travel to different countries to pursue their livelihood and so forth.
Okay, here's an interesting email from Ricky. We've got quite a few emails which we'll share after the news at 9, so stick around for that. They are interesting. For example, Ricky says, Joshua Wong is the definition of a millennial kid, spoiled and entitled. Around the world, pro-democracy activists are beaten, tortured and imprisoned for years, and he is so upset about being detained at an airport and literally not allowed to call his mummy. What a crybaby. I have friends who have been detained and questioned in the US and even Hong Kong for longer and then sent back to their home country only because of their religion and the colour of their skin. Thailand is a military dictatorship that overthrew a democratically elected government. Of course they wouldn't allow a pro-democracy activist who's going to speak at an anti-government rally to enter. That comes from Ricky. If you agree or disagree, then do share with us. You can email backchat@rthk.hk. You can call us as well, 233 88 266, or you can go to our Facebook page and comment there. That's Backchat on RTHK. RTHK Radio 3. We're going to say goodbye for the moment to Willie Lam, who's an adjunct professor at the Chinese University. Amnesty International will be joining us after the news, and we'd like to hear from you as well. We're also going to be talking about the Formula E, the car race, which is being held in Central, the first of its kind. That's over the weekend. Some controversy over who's actually allowed to watch. If you want to comment on that, again, backchat@rthk.hk is the email. The forecast for today, sunny intervals with a few squally showers later. Temperatures up to about 30 degrees, and the outlook windier with a few rain patches over the weekend and Chungyang Festival holiday. 27 degrees now, relative humidity is at 78%.
It is needed to serve, and especially to serve those that are most vulnerable.
Mr. Guterres recently spent a decade as the head of the UN Refugee Agency.
You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Friday morning, last one of the week, with Danny Gittings and me, Hugh Chiverton. We're continuing to talk about Joshua Wong not going to Thailand, being returned to Hong Kong, the issue of blacklisting, the issue of the involvement of Beijing, of the Thai authorities, the Hong Kong authorities, what kind of obligation do the Hong Kong authorities have in this situation. We have with us Mark Daly, an international human rights lawyer, and Lawrence Ma, who's a barrister and chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. We're also joined now by Patrick Poon, China researcher with Amnesty International, East Asia Regional Office. Later, we're also going to be talking about the Formula E, the car races, which is being held, electric car race for the first time over the weekend. Some controversy over who will actually be allowed to even look at the race. We'll be tackling that with Jeff Hesselwood, our motoring correspondent, later in the programme. Once again, our email address. We've got some very interesting emails to get to in just a moment. Backchat@rthk.hk. You can call us as well, 233-88266. We'll put you on air. Or you can go to our Facebook page as well. That's Backchat on RTHK Radio 3, and we will share your comments.
And as Hugh said, some very interesting emails coming in. Let's just bring in a selection of them. Drake talking about the delay in returning Joshua Wong to Hong Kong. Remember, Joshua Wong was held in a detention cell at Bangkok Airport for around 10 hours. Drake says, well, if it's totally up to the Thai government's decision, Joshua would have been repatriated to Hong Kong on the return flight. I think it means the same flight. Joshua was detained unreasonably for 10 hours. The Prime Minister said explicitly it was China's problem, and Hong Kongers are Chinese all the same. Thailand was obviously seeking advice on where to send Joshua Wong back to. Jeffrey, in another very interesting email, speculating about possible involvement by the Hong Kong government. In the first half of the programme, Willie Lam referring to the existence of a blacklist of Hong Kong people who not be allowed not only into China, but also being circulated to other governments in the region and in some cases used to stop Hong Kong people from visiting those countries. Jeffrey says, you need to know that the Hong Kong government is also circulating a list of people who were arrested during Occupy Central. One friend went to Macau on June the 4th and was arrested and escorted back to Hong Kong. I would challenge why Hong Kong is passing local data to China. What about the Data Protection Act? Yes, Lawrence Ma, what about the Data Protection Act? These stories have been around for a while. We've heard other stories before of people arrested during Occupy Central but not charged, so their names would never have been revealed publicly, and nonetheless now experiencing difficulties when they're travelling outside Hong Kong, which would suggest that the information had been released by the Hong Kong authorities.
The data protection ordinance operates on private organizations. It's not an ordinance that is designed against the government. Anyway, the names were not released publicly. It was probably circulated amongst government. Now, if you say that the Hong Kong government has given a list to the mainland government, you probably have omitted the fact that the mainland government may have also have people here monitoring the local situation here during the Occupying Central movements and got the names themselves. So you can't be really saying that we have given them the name list.
If you're saying that the personal data privacy ordinance doesn't apply to the Hong Kong government, I'm not sure that's correct, but let's just take that as a read for the moment. Then are you saying there'd be nothing wrong in any case for the Hong Kong government supplying this kind of information?
Well, I mean, the international foreign affairs practice, I would have thought that every country has a list of this sort, and they circulate amongst themselves. So because a country won't want to, for example, China wants to know who are the terrorists in Thailand, and reciprocally, Thailand will also want to know who are
the terrorists in Hong Kong. You're using terrorism here, aren't you? China wants to know who are the terrorists in Hong Kong.
Terrorists and activists, for example, inclusive, and people that they don't want to enter. They don't want to be in their countries. So Thailand and other countries in Southeast Asia and also other countries may have requested a list, not just from China, but also, say, for example, from America, to give them a list as to who are the activists and probably terrorists too in their own countries. So they will, every country will have a name list supplied by other countries. I will have thought. And then they have to make up their own mind if that name comes up on the list, whether they will allow entry.
Mark Daly, what do you think about this suggestion from our listener that the Hong Kong government might be involved in compiling these blacklists?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously there's a lot of mystery surrounding this and a lot of speculation, but that's
have you had any clients or cases come across
to keep pursuing this, to try to find and scrutinize and if it takes starting legal actions in various countries as to what's going on with this, then that needs to be done, because it's such an important issue for the rule of law. Blending Joshua Wong in with terrorists, I think, that's a completely different level. Obviously, again, it's that balance, but we need to get at how does somebody get on this list, and there are ways that the legal systems can find out, right?
Okay, a couple more comments. So first of all, G says the most basic thing is that the SAR government should insist on immediate notification of detention of an SAR citizen so that the family of detained person can take action. Otherwise, it's time for advice to be given to all citizens that you travel to Thailand at your own risk, no matter whether there is any ground for detention. Was the detention for purposes of investigation or to await the next flight to Hong Kong? Hong Kong should ask. That comes from G. And R says, what about the people who are blacklisted from Hong Kong? While Hong Kong is supposed to have its own immigration rules, it regularly denies entry to Taiwanese and Chinese dissidents living in other jurisdictions, most likely on orders from the mainland. This needs to be addressed as well. Patrick Poon from Amnesty International, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Isn't it a bit hopeless, really, looking for transparency in this area, because countries are allowed to say, basically, stop anybody they like from entering them? That's a sovereign right. Joshua was allowed to travel from Hong Kong, so his rights here weren't breached, and beyond that, there's not much anyone can do about it.
Well, I mean, international law, as we understand from our law and policy college, is also a grey area. But the problem is we have to look at international practice. And then actually what I just heard from now is just it seems to be, an explanation of understanding of what equivalent of activists to terrorists. And it's really worrying if this is that kind of understanding or attitude, because activists include many kinds of people, they work on various issues, including really human rights issues. And then why they would be considered something like, equivalent or similar to terrorists in this kind of issue is really incomprehensible. So I think we have to really be cautious and serious in considering this issue by really considering case by case. And then, in Joshua's case, how can a young activist like him be considered with any kind of, endangering any national security in the country, while he was only invited to speak at university?
Well, yeah, but of course, Thailand, it's not that stable, is it? And it's under military rule at the moment. They've got all kinds of problems that even they would admit, and that to turn up over on the anniversary of a controversial massacre of students and to talk to students as a student leader who's caused at the very least a lot of disruption in his home country, that looks like a dangerous thing to do. You could well argue that.
Well, they can make that argument by saying that's a concern, but is that whether it's a justification to claim that because he will speak at such an event that would lead to whatever unrest or any kind of situation that the Thai government cannot control. And then now even detaining him for over 10 hours because of that. Is all that justified? Even for international practice, it's simply not acceptable. And then also the Thai immigration official mentioned to Thai media that they got a request from the Chinese government, although later the Thai military government denied. But this all actually not very consistent in the information, even from the official information. And then also the practice itself is also not acceptable international practice.
Now, Patrick Poon criticised our guest Lawrence Ma's reference to terrorists and seeming equation of Joshua Wong with terrorists, and Mark Daly also made a critical comment about that. Lawrence Ma, would you like to respond?
Yeah. I'm not saying
you're not saying Joshua Wong is a terrorist?
No, of course it's not. He's far from it. But what I'm saying, the list would contain a list of unwanted people. And those unwanted people ranges from human rights activists to the far end of a terrorist.
Do you accept perhaps our other guest criticism that it's not really very helpful to bring terrorism into the discussion here?
No, I'm just giving an example that the list, the sort of people that the list may contain. You can't argue that it won't contain human rights activists, because the list would have contained all sorts of unwanted people, I would have thought, right? So I don't think there's two different lists. For example, a list that contains unwanted political activists and a second list which might contain terrorists. I'm just combining that list together. I'm not making reference that Joshua Wong is a terrorist.
Patrick Poon, are you satisfied with that explanation?
Well, I just want to ask whether this is justifiable, even to have a list of human rights activists and political activists that would be considered normal to be on that list, to be not wanted to enter a country. This is really a very typical way of misunderstanding what human rights activists and political activists mean. Why they would be excluded from entering countries just because they're human rights activists and political activists. So it's something like, I don't think this explanation really gives any justification for the Thai government's action at all.
Patrick Poon, you're a human rights activist. Do you and your colleagues travel freely to Thailand?
I don't have any colleagues that will have this problem so far, probably because I belong to an international organization that I would not be considered a human rights activist as such, would be considered to put on the list. But it's very unfair to other activists who do not belong to human rights organizations like mine that would not be allowed to enter a country just because they're human rights activists or political activists, and that would be considered normal.
Isn't this a very small issue for Amnesty International? Amnesty International has huge concerns about the human rights situation in Thailand, don't you? All kinds of issues, and the issue of whether one particular person is stopped and held for a number of hours at the airport is a very small issue compared with various other human rights issues in Thailand.
That's really the case because, as you can see, last week we also had our Thai colleagues who tried to release a report on torture in Thailand, but then they were warned by the Thai authorities at the last minute that they shouldn't hold a press conference to release the report. And it's actually kind of warning that it's very give us a very daunting situation to see what is happening in Thailand, that not even allowing organizations like us to release a report about human rights violations in the country. And then even I would want to introduce several cases, briefly, that we also heard last year, we have also documented several cases of Chinese dissidents, Chinese activists, human rights defenders. They were detained after they tried to seek asylum to a third country, but then several of them were deported back to China. Even two of them has already got UN refugee status. But then, only days before they were scheduled to travel to Canada, they were deported back to China. And it's very incomprehensible why it would happen, even they have already UN refugee status in Bangkok. So it's something like very worrying. What's the human rights situation in Thailand nowadays? And also, it seems to be like China's influence is really something that we should ask. Although, like, there's very hard to find hard evidence to prove that. But it's really a question why these people would still be deported, even they have already been given UN refugee status.
Mark Daly, Joshua Wong, is a very controversial figure, isn't he? And for some people, he's a hero. For some people, he's a real villain. If you look at for example, comments on the South China Morning Post stories about this, you'll see a lot of people who really hate Joshua Wong, and as I say, he really divides people. But isn't the truth that this was kind of a stunt? He said himself that he thought he had a 50-50 chance. Somebody else is quoted as saying they thought he had a 3 in 10 chance of actually getting into Thailand. He knew he wasn't going to get in, or he was very unlikely to get in. This was really just an effort, an exercise in embarrassing China.
Well, even if it was, and I don't know if there's enough evidence to say that. To me, beating my drum here, we want governments having blacklists short of the terrorists, short of a security terrorist list. Do we want that going further and further? I don't think we do. We don't want our governments arbitrarily having lists simply because they don't like people for any particular reason. That's not what our government should be doing. There should be. We want transparency. We want openness. And from what I can see, Joshua Wong.
Oh, come on! We've been down this.
Democracy.
We've been down this before. Immigration departments do not have transparency. They do not have openness. And perhaps in a perfect world they would. But as you know from all these cases you fought, immigration departments do the world over, not just Hong Kong and not just Thailand, do to a large extent operate in the black box, don't they?
No. Well, we'd like it to be a little more transparent, but no, they have to justify. They have to provide some reasons, and different countries are different, but some reasons for why they're making these decisions.
Okay, one more email. This is from Michael. Thanks, Michael, who says, "Dear Backchat, the Joshua Wong Bangkok case is another example of how the steady, continuous decline in the rights of Hong Kong citizens since the handover. The decline is likely to continue right up to the handover to China and will touch many aspects of our daily lives currently enjoyed by us. For example, what's stopping the Hong Kong government adding other reasons other than civil disobedience for placing people on the blacklist?" That comes from Michael. Lawrence Marr, aren't you concerned that this guy, who, as you say, is far from being a terrorist, is just not allowed to travel freely around the world? He hasn't done anything wrong. Why are people stopping him?
I think human rights activists has a tendency of quote, stir up, unquote, troubles in the eye of all immigration authorities, I have thought. I mean, of course, we understand that, yes, you have a right of expression, you have freedom of expression, but it is also the government's concern and the government's duty to protect citizens and to prevent chaos from happening.
Are you suggesting chaos would happen if Joshua Wong was allowed into Bangkok to give a speech to students?
There is a possibility. I mean, if the purpose of he going into Thailand to speak to the students during a student massacre 40 years ago would have probably stirred them up in arms, for example, or in rocks, for example, or to do things that is without the control of the government.
Sorry, did you say probably would have stirred them up in arms?
Yeah, or in rocks, for example, in stones, or in demonstrations on the streets, and to charge against public authorities. And
the Thais were right to deny Joshua Wong access because if he had arrived in Thailand, it could have led to violence. Is what you're saying there?
Well, I'm not saying they have a right. I mean, whether they have a right, it has to be tested in the Thai court of law. But all I'm saying is that the Thai government probably have a legitimate concern of he entering there and stirring all this up, and then there is a public chaos. We don't know what the extent is, and it would be difficult to estimate what is the effect of his speeches. But of course, it is simply to be a legitimate concern of the Thai government in making a decision to refuse entry.
Mark Daly?
I don't know. I think probably by not letting him in, they've done more for the democratic development because they've exposed the issue more, and people are going to talk about it a lot more. So maybe the Thai government's done the right thing.
OK, well, Mark Daly, thanks for joining us, International Human Rights Lawyer. Many thanks to Lawrence Ma, barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, Patrick Poon, who's a China researcher with Amnesty International, the East Asia Regional Office, earlier speaking also to Willie Lamb. Many thanks to the very interesting emails from our listeners this morning. Thank you very much indeed, as well as comments on our Facebook page. OK, one more from Letitia, who says on our Facebook, no one is expecting anything from this lackey administration. I strongly suggest 689, his new territories buddies and his formidable gangs start going back to the Qing dynasty style, slick, long pig hairtail to demonstrate their loyalty to China. That's from Letitia. Thank you very much indeed for those comments. Finally today, at 23 minutes past 9, this weekend sees the first Formula E car race to be held in Hong Kong. I think perhaps the first ever car race to be held on public streets in Hong Kong. Jeff Hesselwood is a motoring correspondent, a regular on RTHK Radio 3, of course, and joins us now. Jeff, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh.
Hi, thank you very much indeed. You must be pretty excited about this. I was going to say as a petrol head, but of course as a petrol head this is not your thing. So
no, it's not petrol.
No.
I went to a lunch at the Foreign Correspondents Club yesterday, and there were lots and lots of Formula One fans there, and yet we're talking Formula E with a three-time winner, Sam Bird. So I think we still... It's sort of hanker after Formula One, but you're never going to get there in Hong Kong. It's too expensive, too difficult, and it just won't happen. But Formula E is something that we've got to look forward to.
Yeah, well, you can look forward to it if you've got a ticket, right? I mean, the organisers are getting a lot of bad publicity already with this idea they're going to put up pieces of cloth are going to be put up so no one can peek through unless they paid. What do you make of that?
Well, if you look at the price of the tickets, they're not cheap. They're really not. I won't go into it all here on air, but if you go, their website is hkformulae.com.
It's 2,380, I think I'm right in saying.
That's the top one, yeah, but they even start at 580, which seems a lot to me. You'd think they'd give us sort of free spectator area. But apart from what we can expect, what can the drivers expect? Because they've never actually raced Formula E in the rain. And we've got the number one signal up at the moment. They say they've tested in the rain at Donington Park in the East Midlands in UK, but they've never actually raced.
Well, hang on, if they're racing in the UK, they must have encountered rain pretty fast.
Well, they've raced in London, and no, there was no rain. So they've never actually held a race, and this is season 3, season 4, they've never actually held a race in the rain. And Sam Bird said it could be an expensive parking lot, which I thought was a good way of phrasing it.
So they might all short circuit because it's raining.
Well, it's not just that, but these cars have got massive torque. Just imagine that when an MTR train takes off, how quickly it speeds up. That's what happens with these Formula E cars because of the electric motors. And in the wet, it's going to be a bit tricky, especially if we've got quite a few tight corners on this circuit.
Maybe it's a good thing they're keeping people away, isn't it, then?
Even on their website, it shows that you need a raincoat, not an umbrella. So I think they're anticipating rain come tomorrow and Sunday.
I mean, this is run by a private company, isn't it? I mean, it's done with the agreement of the Hong Kong authorities, but there's no specific involvement from any statutory body or anything like that, as far as I know.
No, it's sponsored by HKT, rather, and the government has to sort of allow it to happen because you've got road closures. That's the other thing. The Transport Department has to get involved.
That's right. I think it was kind of sold as a public affair, as a way to kind of burnish the image of Hong Kong, for us to look good in the way that the Singapore Grand Prix and other Grand Prix around the world are used as kind of tourist element, to enhance the appearance, the image of certain places, and Hong Kong was kind of supposed to be doing that. So people, are kind of not happy that this is going on. That's happening. It's going on public roads, and they're not even allowed to watch. They're not even allowed to watch from a distance.
I mean, they've got what they call an e-village, where they've got lots of activities.
In the e-village, A, you've got to pay. B, you can't watch the race. You've got to watch it on a screen. I mean, at the Sevens or other villages, I thought the idea was that they were public, that they were free, that you share it. You share it.
I think they've done it wrong in a lot of ways, but I mentioned the sponsor. I won't mention them again. They don't give much away, do they? So, but I don't know. It's going to be. It's a 2.1 kilometre circuit, 10 turns. clockwise circuit, some fast corners, and a 500-metre straight. So it could be an interesting race, but like I said, if it rains, it could all hell could get loose. I don't know.
How fast do they go on the straight?
About 200 kilometres an hour.
Wow,
that is, yeah.
That is fast. Is that
well, it's relatively fast, but I mean, I used to race cars, Hugh, and I used to do 200 kilometres back in 1975, so okay. I'm not sure it's outstanding at the moment.
Now, earlier on you were telling us we really can't have Formula One in Hong Kong, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Well,
we haven't got who's going to pay for it for a start? Can you imagine anyone fronting up to build a circuit and put all the safety requirements in? I don't think anybody would pay, not private, not government, nobody.
What happens in Macau? How can it work in Macau? I know it's Formula 3, but how does that work there that it won't work here?
Well, it brings in a huge amount of tourism from Macau, and they've been doing it since 1954. And
so why can't we do it then?
Macau will never disclose figures. Every year we ask them, well, what did you make profit, what happened, and nobody will tell us exactly what happened. So I think it just comes out of the tourist budget, and I don't think Hong Kong's got that amount of tourist budget.
You're just saying it's too expensive, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, Macau's got a natural circuit, 6.1 kilometre circuit up the hill and then coming around onto the main straight. It's different, and as I said, it's been there since 1954, so I suppose it's got some heritage. But
well, can't we go down the road to Stanley or go down the road to Sheko or something like that in Hong Kong?
You could just go on a minibus.
You're optimistic about somebody fronting up with the millions and millions it would cost, aren't you?
Okay, and who do you fancy for the big race? What is the big race? Is the big race on Sunday?
It's on Sunday at 4 o'clock. It's on TV live if you can't get in or don't want to pay the money to get in. So 4 o'clock Sunday. Qualifying is 12 o'clock Sunday. I'm not sure that's on television. But I fancy... Well, Sebastian Buemi, the Swiss driver, is the current champion, and he was... challenged by Lucas de Grassi, who's won in Macau. But at the final race of last season, Lucas took Sebastian and himself off. Sebastian got back in, and Lucas didn't. So Sebastian became title winner. So it's between those two, I think. Sam Bird, like I said, has won 3 races in Formula E, but I don't think he's in the running. He might get a podium, but I don't think he's going to actually win.
Okay, well, we'll hope the rain stays off, otherwise they'll be with umbrellas or whatever. Jeff, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And Jeff, I think, will be reporting over the weekend, keeping up to date with what's happening there. Many thanks to you. Danny, the home of massive talk. I like that phrase.
Yes.
Massive talk.
Let's hope there's no rain over the weekend.
Yes, indeed. Okay, that's just about it from the programme for today and for this week. We'll be back on Tuesday. The weather forecast, sunny intervals with a few squally showers later today. Maximum temperature about 30 degrees. The outlook windier with a few rain patches over the weekend, and the Chungyang Festival holiday. 27 degrees now, humidity's at 79%.
Hi, this is Phil Lam. Social enterprise provides a common platform for people from all walks of life to work together to make Hong Kong a better place for all. Social enterprises express creativity and vitality and bring together people with diverse backgrounds and talents to serve the community in many ways. Let's all support the vibrant social enterprises. Social enterprise and you, progressing together.
It's 9:30 now. Time for the news with Samantha Butler.
The Haitian government says the number of dead from Hurricane Matthew is now close to 300. Relief agencies say the peninsula's main city suffered almost complete destruction, with 80% of the buildings levelled. The leaders of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have opened their annual meeting in Washington with a call for global free trade, saying it's the only way to eliminate extreme poverty. And researchers are warning that the health benefits of eating farmed salmon are declining because the amount of the omega-3 fatty acid they contain has dropped. I'll have the full stories at 10 o'clock.
It's time right now on Radio 3 to say good morning to Phil Whelan and his guests on The Morning Brew.
Hello. Hello, Phil. How are you? Not too bad at all. Good morning. Newly spotted. Hello. You never Facebook chat with me, Phil. Good morning. He's got the Tom and Jerry type violence. It's a great experience if you just want to get a bit of zing.
On your radio and live online, this is The Morning Brew.
Good morning to you and welcome to Friday here on The Morning Brew. Today we're going to hit that kitchen with Chris Kerr, Chef Chris Kerr coming back today. Top food ideas, tips and tricks. This section will be broadcast in Australian. NICAM is provided.